Hey there, how you doing? Sorry for the late start. Um, Technical errors on my end. Today we're going to talk about starting with session zero and how best to do that. Uh, how that's going to how you're going to use that to start your campaign to make your life easier and make sure your players are on board with everything that you want to do and are trying to establish. It is very important to have a session zero, uh, especially if we're going to start a long campaign. And what I would do is, this is a time to meet with your players to figure out the regular time that your campaign is going to be. It's going to be weekly, bi weekly, once a month, whatever it may be, and figure out a time for that. And then try to schedule your session zero to match that time. Um, I would try to say if if you decide as a group that your sessions want to be weekly on Saturday at noon, then I would schedule the session zero for the same time. Now, not everybody might be able to meet, but so you can meet with them one on one, but it's just easier because there's a lot of stuff for you to cover, and you don't have to repeat yourself, and you don't have to keep answering the same questions. And this is also a good first meeting for players to get to know each other, so they can determine if this is the right group for them. Which is just as important. Like they need to know if the campaign's going to be right for them, or the group is going to be right for them, and if it's going to be fun, if they're going to mesh with the group. Um, so it's very important that you have this session with your players together. So I would try to very much stress that if possible. Now things come up, but if a player is absent, you need to have a session with zero with them privately, because this is very important for every player, and it gets them all on the same page. And there's an expectation. You set an expectation of what everything's going to be about, and they can make a decision then if that is something that they want to participate and continue in with. So today I was going to basically go over my house rules document that I have, which I read to players at the start of session zero, and we go over this point by point, and I ask if there's any questions along the way. So let's go to that. And so here it is. So this is something that I created in Obsidian. This is my house rules. This is published on the campaign's webpage that we have, so players can refer to it. It covers it's sort of my catch-all. It covers most things. It covers the big picture stuff like attendance and etiquette, stuff like that. And then it also covers small picture stuff like minor rule tweaks that I've done or anything like that. Um, so the first thing that I do here is, you can see this is a living document. It changes as it needs to. Please review occasionally. Um, I let players know right away that if something's not working with house rules, I am willing to change it and make that work better. So I will definitely do that. Um, uh, then I talk about attendance. This is always the problem with D&D groups is attendance. If a player is not, and then you can set this for however you want. This is how I have it set. Missing 3 sessions in a 5-month period results in replacement. But and like, it's fine if they miss a session because life comes up and stuff. But if they're missing this is a bi-weekly game, so if they're missing 3 sessions in a 5-month period, they're missing a good percentage of sessions. And so therefore I just don't think they have time to play, and so I need to find another player um, that will yeah, that will have that will be there. So, and then I talk about how, like, no call, no show. which is a big one. Like if you text or something in the group and say, hey, I can't make it, my car broke down or whatever, that's one thing. But like not texting, not calling when you know there is a time that we have to play uh, is like not the same as missing 3 sessions. That to me is just disrespectful. And it, like, basically if a player does that once, I'll give them a warning, but if they do it again, they're out. And no hard feelings, but that's just the way it is. And I need to make room. I need to not only have respect for myself that, that I'm spending my time, but respect for my players that do show up in their time. Then we talk about etiquette, fun first and foremost. So basically, just don't be a dick. Don't be mean spirited. We're all here to have fun. Respect other people's opinions and ideas, and try to have respect for other people. I don't allow like political talk or anything like that at the table. I really don't think it's the time or place for it. And we're here to have fun. We're here to play D&D. We're here to play make believe. So let's just keep it to that. I mean, of course, we want to know each other personally, but you don't want to get into an argument. It's not a Thanksgiving dinner with your family. Just have fun. Then we talk about character creation. I have my own sort of guides for character creation. Now, you need to establish like what source material players can pull from when they create characters. What characters are allowed, what races, what species are allowed. Things like that are very important to establish early on. And so I have additional things like character quirks. I give every character a quirk. They can take one flaw or feat. Now this was written in 5e before 1 D&D 1 2024, whatever it is. That they can get a +2 and plus, if they take a flaw, they can gain a feat, basically. And there's some other rules here, like a random trinket and stuff like this, but this gives them a really clear sort of guideline on what I expect from their character creation. Then next thing I talk about how experience is going to be doled out, and in my campaign, Tomb of Annihilation, I use a milestone system because for that campaign, for what I'm doing for that campaign, it works because players, I need to have players at a certain level when they get to certain stages in the campaign. And so, and a lot of it is, there's a lot of encounters that aren't monster based or combat based, or where there's a lot of role play encounters where they can get an experience too. But I don't really worry about that, because I'm like, okay, if they go into the jungle, they're going to be level 4. If they get to this point in the jungle, they're going to be level 5 and 6 and stuff like that. So for me, it's milestone systems, but you can use whatever you want here. Just let your players know what system you're going to use. And then now I have a list of sort of different aspects I brought in with actual house rules that I use. So lingering injuries, basically, if a player gets knocked unconscious, they have to make a con saving throw, or they sustain a lingering injury, which they roll from the chart, which can be healed with greater restoration or something like that. Recently, one of my players, he got knocked to 0, failed his con saving throw, and then had a permanent burn scar on his face, which really fits his character. So it gives like a -1 to persuasion, but a +1 to intimidation, which really works for him. I've been doing this since the very beginning of playing D&D, since I first started with this house rule called Bind Wounds, which I allow players to roll 1d4 after a combat encounter. That's free. that they can use to, like, the way I describe it is like they're applying bandages or stuff like that to any cuts or scrapes. It's not for big injuries, but I mean, it's like they just get 1d4 hit points back, basically, and they can do that after every combat encounter once. Um, but that's something I've been using for since first edition or whatever, and I just like it, so I held it over. You don't have to do that. I talk about initiative tie and how that'll be resolved. I talk about fumbles. I roll a fumble chart for ones, natural ones, which is always fun. I think my players like it, and I mean, so I like the fumble chart. Again, it's something I've been doing since first edition. And I've always found it fun as a player, so I come and do that as a DM. Then I have examine creature. So in Tomb of Annihilation in particular, there are a lot of monsters and creatures that the players don't normally run into. So I give them the opportunity to find out some information about the creature, so they can do a free action of examining a creature based on a roll of what the creature is, like beast or a nature check. And if they roll 10 or higher, they get a bit of background, stuff like that. And then 20 or higher, they can find out a great deal about the creature. Casting spells. So I talk about particularly how I'm going to use spell magic. So this is where a lot of rules sort of lawyering comes in. I can talk, I swear. So I'm trying to spell it out so I can avoid any of that, right? Like I don't enforce material components and stuff, except for stuff that's like a gold or amount, or you need a 500 GP diamond, right? To cast. Like, you have to have those in your inventory to cast them, but otherwise, I'm not talking about sticks and twigs. You have to have that in your inventory. You must have a free hand to cast spells with material components, or use a spellcasting focus. Casting spells, and this is kind of one that my players sort of went, oh, I don't know, but casting spells with a verbal component must be delivered in normal tone of voice and can be heard from a distance of 70 feet. So a lot of times, like in games, it's always weird when a verbal component spell is like cast sort of stealthily. And I'm just like, how do you do that? Because I'm going to notice, if I'm talking with you, I'm going to notice somebody muttering nonsense over there if I don't, and so that would be a thing. Now I've modified this somewhat, and I need to modify this document a little bit, is that they can sort of do it under their breath, but this is sort of a general rule. Like this ruling can come up, and this is very situational. I mean, this thing is super situational. Resting. Now, normally you don't have to put in stuff about resting, but this is Tomb of Annihilation, and resting is a big deal in the jungle, so I spelled it out exactly how that's going to work in the jungle, because I did not want this to be any surprise. Again, the session 0 is to make sure that you don't surprise your players with different rules and stuff. So this is session 0. Before they even know they're going to get into the jungle, I tell them this is going to be a thing. It doesn't spoil anything or anything like that, but it lets them know how this campaign is going to work. And you see, I use the exhaustion rules from 1 D&D. This is again before I started this campaign in 5e. So stealth, I talk about how stealth is going to work. Ultimately, so in case there's any confusion about stealth and how it's going to work. Lock picking, I talk about lock picking, how that's going to work, right? and how much time that needs. So you can't pick a lock in the middle of combat, for instance, because it takes approximately 10 minutes. Now you can lower that time by rolling a low time, but this is not something that you can do in the middle of combat. So I want to make this very clear, right, to my players. And then I talk about stealing. If you've ever had a rogue that just goes around just pickpocketing everyone, you know about this. So I talk about stealing and how that's going to work. And then because it's of Tomb Annihilation, and because there is a hexcrawl aspect to it, I talk about just living in the world and what resources are going to be tracked. Because that is a thing. And normally in most campaigns, like when I ran Curse of Strahd, for instance, I did not care about players' resources as much. And so I hand-waved a lot of resource stuff. So it depends on your campaign as to what you have to put in. But again, these are all rules to put in. So if there is any deviation or any slight question of interpretation from the player's handbook, you need to put that in so players aren't surprised. And it's fine as long as the rules are spelled out beforehand. So this again, a 5e, I ruled drinking potions was bonus action. That was a house rule that I've had forever. But I say that they can only carry 2 potions on their belt, right? Or sash or whatever. They can carry 2 potions that are readily available, and any other potions that are not readily available are in their pack. And so it would take a full round to drink those potions. So say they have 2 healing potions on their belt and they want to drink a potion of Enlarge, and that's that they haven't specified on the character sheet that that's on their belt, so that's in their pack. So to get that potion, they'd have to go in their pack, which would take a round. That's essentially all it is. And then I just talk about the various sort of make it more apparent, the things like climbing on the larger creatures, disarm, tumble, flanking rules, and grappling. I had a lot of new players at the table too, so I would like to talk about that. Just so they're very clear. And then moving through allies and how that's done. And then the big one, the really big one, best for last, I guess, is I talk about death and how that can be permanent. So if you have death, or if character death is a thing that can happen in your world, you need to state that in session 0 up front. You need to be upfront about that, because not all players like that, and not all players would be happy with that. And so you need to give them the option that maybe this isn't the campaign for them, right? So if their character dies, if they don't like it and they continue on with the campaign and their character dies, and you can be like, look, we did session 0. I told you this is a real possibility. Sorry, this is something that happens. I don't know what to tell you. So that's sort of my house rules document that I go over. And then we address, let me pull up my other thing here. We address things like safety tools and stuff like that, how I will handle that. Like I make it very clear that my players, I know my in-person players pretty well, so I don't do like a lines and veils thing or a card thing. But what I do is I make it a point to regularly remind them that they're always open to talk to me if they have any problems or anything like that. They're always open to talk to me privately, and I will handle them. That has happened, and I have handled them. Hopefully everybody was satisfied with that resolution. but I want to keep my players happy. Again, my number one job as a DM is to make sure my players are having fun, and I have fun when my players have fun. So it's very important to talk about that. Then we basically, I encourage us all to create players together, because I want to make sure the party's balanced. Like, I don't want 5 fighters. That's going to make it hard to balance encounters. It's going to make it hard for me. It's going to make it less fun for them. So we sort of talk about character creation together. Now, they don't have to finish character creation in the session 0. They can do it on their own in their own time. But I also work with them on backstories, tying it into the world, and try to work with them that way. And I continue on that past session 0 too. So that's something that we keep going. Then I talk about the world that the characters are going to be entering. I talk, for Tomb of Annihilation, I talked a little bit about Chult. I gave them like history that their players would know, sort of let them what they expect, and then asked if they had any questions about that, if they had any concerns, or if they wanted me to add anything or something like that, that I was open to it. And then, basically that's kind of it. Make it a social event, sort of make it a very friendly, social, casual get together, to talk about how the game is going to work and what expectations are going to be. If you do that, you're going to set yourself up for success going forward, starting with session 1 and on. Players are going to be a lot happier with it. They're going to know what's expected of them. They're going to know what they should expect of you as a DM. And it's just really going to help. It's going to help ease any like arguments that could happen at the table or anything like that. And it lets your players know what kind of DM you are from the start, which is great, because I really want to know, if I'm a player, I want to know the type of DM I'm getting involved with. I'm trusting them to take me on a journey, and so this is a good way for me to get to know them and for me to get to know the other players and what they expect. So I really, really highly suggest you do a session 0 if at all possible. I know it's not always possible. For a one-shot, you can't really do a session 0. I'd say at the very beginning, at least, of your one-shot, take 5 to 10 minutes and sort of really kind of go over like a really mini session 0 or something. Like, just talk very briefly about sort of what expectations are and a few maybe house rule things that you're adding, just so people know, even on a one shot. But if you're doing like a one shot, you're probably doing pre-made characters or something like that, or you talk to them beforehand about what characters to do so you can hit the ground running. But just go over very briefly, sort of like something that I've discussed, like take 5, maybe 10 minutes at the start. Really just keep it friendly and fun and simple for your players, and your players will thank you for it, and you'll have a better time and easier time DMing because of it. I hope that has helped. Later this week, I will be covering, I'm writing out the scripts now for later this week. Later this week, I'll be covering some tools to help DMs start a campaign or run a campaign better. I also want to talk about Obsidian at some point, which I use for my DM notes, which I showed you in my house rules. I really love it. It's a great it's just a great like tool, and it really keeps me organized, especially with a long campaign where there's a lot of backstory and I'm trying to manage multiple plots and threads and stuff like that. So, but that's all coming in the future. That's coming later this week. So be sure to like and subscribe for those. I hope you had a really good time. I hope you learned something. I'm here to help. I would love to hear your comments about what you think is good for players, how you do session 0, or maybe why you don't do session 0. Please tell me. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear the philosophy behind not doing a session 0. Like, let me know if you have tips and tricks for me. I love it. I love learning. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a good day, and may all your rolls be D20s. Well, may all your rolls be 20s, I guess. All right. Have a good one.